Thank you to Macy's for the playlist. Let's start on Israel and Hamas on the brink of a hostage deal, because it is happening, and we will be talking about Itamar Ben-Gvir and also the dumb motherfucker Smotrich and what they are saying about the hostage release
Israel's
situation.
War Cabinet is meeting right now on a deal with Hamas to free about 50 of the 237 people being held captive. It's been 45 days since hostages, mostly innocent civilians, were taken by Hamas on the Jewish Sabbath, taken during an attack on Israel when terrorists raped women and murdered families. More than 1,000 people that day. For each spared that fate and instead taken hostage, the unknown and the wait is excruciating for their families. Now, we are told an announcement of a deal that will allow some of those hostages to come home could be imminent. President Biden addressed that moments ago.
We're now very close, very close. We could bring some of these hostages home very soon. But I don't want to get into the details of things because nothing is done until it's done. And we have more to say, we will, but things are looking good.
CNN is covering the story from all angles. Oren Lieberman is in Tel Aviv. MJ Lee is here in Washington at the White House. MJ, I want to start with you. That was a pretty remarkable moment from the President of the United States to lean that far into where he thinks that this negotiation is right now.
Yeah, that's right. You heard the president saying that we are very close to a deal, and that very...
I want you guys to understand something. This could have happened day one. This could have happened day one. Joe Brandon could have stopped. Joe Brandon could have literally forced this almost single-handedly. Okay? Sure, Israel, the far-right government of Israel would kick, scream the entire way like a bunch of petulant children. But almost all of the infrastructure destruction and all of the deaths, 50-plus journalists, 5,000-plus children, 13,000 civilians in general in Palestine and Gaza, all of that could have been avoided. The many hospitals that have been destroyed, blown to bits, blown up, attacked with artillery and shelling from tanks. You know, could have happened. You say Hamas could have surrendered, but this, for some weird reason, escapes your brain. When you analyze this from the perspective of Hamas, you forget that we have no control over what they do. We do, however, have control over what Israel does. We do. The ceasefire, of course, is only for 5 days, so we'll see what happens there as well. Here's a thread from Barak Ravid. We will be covering it. 6,400 children confirmed dead. Wait, really? The latest numbers are 6,400? That's crazy. People are actually saying they hope the war continues after the ceasefire. It's sickening. Yeah, I think that we reached a pivot point. We reached a changing point here. There's a generational divide on this issue, and I think everyone that has been conditioned and went through their more formative years, 5,400 children. Yeah, I don't think it was 6,000 children. I think it's 5,000 children. But what happens if Israel violates the ceasefire? It doesn't seem they would given the constant war crimes. We'll see. I could totally see this being a violation on the Israeli front that they turn around and blame Hamas over. But it doesn't change the reality that Israel has all the power. They've had all the power since day one, and they will continue to have all of the power in the equation. Okay? Anyway, let's continue.
Very much echoes what sources have been telling CNN all morning, that the U.S., Israel, and Hamas are on the cusp of announcing this deal, and it could come as early as today. I was in the room when the president made those remarks, and I did try to ask him at the end how many Americans he believes may be among the 50 hostages initially released. And he said, I'll have plenty of time to talk about the hostages, but not now, basically declining to go into any of the details. And I'll let Oren speak to the details of sort of the contours of this potential deal. But at least for the Biden administration, this, of course, Dana, has been an urgent priority, trying to get these hostages out, because they have said all along that they believe there are at least a handful of American citizens in the mix in Gaza being held by Hamas. And now what U.S. officials are saying is that they are hopeful that 3-year-old American citizen Abigail Edan will be among the 50 hostages that are initially released. She is the youngest known American hostage. Her parents were killed by Hamas. So this is a very tenuous situation, but hopefully U.S. officials are saying this 3-year-old American toddler will be in the mix of the 50 hostages. We've, of course, Anna, seen U.S. officials working around the clock to try to secure this deal over the last few weeks. The president, of course, has been on the phone with Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Emir of Qatar, President of Egypt, and other top U.S. officials have been traveling in the region as well. But, Dana, it's important to underscore, if this deal were to come to fruition, this is not only significant because of the release of hostages, but because this would mark the first sustained pause in fighting and the first major de-escalatory step that Israel will be taking really since the war first began.
MJ, thank you so much for that reporting. And let's get more specific about what sources are telling us this deal may include. The release of 50 women and children. And in exchange, there would be a 4 or 5 day pause in fighting, as MJ just alluded to. Now, 3 Palestinian prisoners would be swapped for each civilian Israeli hostage or other hostage being released by Hamas.
People need to understand the 3-to-1 ratio is not necessarily because like Israel is bad at negotiating. They've done like 1,000-to-1 ratio before. The reason why it's a 3-to-1 ratio is because all of the Palestinians, almost all of the Palestinians, not all, but almost all of the Palestinians that are under Israeli detention are technically under unlawful detention according to international law. Okay? They have no idea why they've been detained for the most part. They have very little legal recourse. It is straight up a hostage situation. It's just that most people don't consider it to be a hostage situation because Israel is the Western-backed state in the process. So when they engage in this kidnapping attempt, then it is totally valid. It must be valid because those are our guys. And our guys don't do anything. Our guys don't fucking take hostages. Our guys don't take, engage in dragnets and collective punishment. They could never do that. That's terrorism. Only Russia does that. Only Hamas does that.
Hamas. Israel would stop flying surveillance drones over Gaza for at least 6 hours each day. Oren, I'm going to go to you now about what is happening in Israel as we speak. The government is meeting. What are you hearing about how that meeting is going and whether or not they will approve this deal?
So this is all part of a legal and political process that is required to approve such a deal and that is required for a critical part of this, and that is to approve the release of Palestinian prisoners.
I like how it's civilian hostages but Palestinian prisoners. Yeah, it's phrased that way so that because the Israeli state imprisoned them without due process, but they are by definition political prisoners. They are political prisoners. But it's also known as like it's also seen as like a normal part of the maintenance of the violent apartheid regime. So it's never going to be considered anything but just another day.
Women and children. So the first part of that is the war cabinet is meeting, and that's a very small group of people, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that will lead straight into a meeting of the Security Cabinet. Again, that's a slightly larger group. And then the full cabinet itself, that is the government. And it needs to be approved at each one of those stages for this deal to go through. Now, that's critical because two partners in Netanyahu's governing coalition, two far-right partners, I should say, have already put out statements saying they will oppose this deal. And that could, of course, scuttle it. And if they wanted to go to the extreme, they could theoretically topple Netanyahu's government. But having spoken to one of the families of the hostages a short time ago, they say they received an assurance from one of the other critical members of Netanyahu's government that if this deal is put forward, it will get approved. And that gives them a critical bit of confidence that having gotten to this point where we see the process in Israel begin to approve a hostage deal and an exchange and an agreement with Hamas that would see them free Israeli and other hostages potentially, that it will get over the line. And that's what they're looking to now. And that's important because these families have heard the word imminent before and have heard reports and rumors that something is about to happen. But if you speak with them, they believe there's something far more tangible here, something far more palpable and real, even if they haven't gotten an official word from the government at this point. Now, these three votes and meetings that are expected tonight are not the end of the process. There is then a 24-hour window in which there can be appeals that the Supreme Court filed against this. That, too, will take its time as that runs its course.
Wasn't this what Hamas wanted in the first place? Weeks ago, they tried to facilitate a deal similar to this. But of course, at that point, enough blood hadn't been shed. So, pro-Palestinian streamers getting clapped today on Twitch. Denims and some others just got it. Be careful. I highly doubt that Twitch would ban me for my coverage over this matter. I have been incredibly careful in what I show, what I say. I mean, that is, you can tell that is the case, given that most of the hater communities have basically been trying to, one, mass report, of course, but most of the things that they have said, like as to why I should be banned, are just untrue.
But from the indications we're seeing here, the government, Netanyahu, feeling confident as this moves forward through the evening. And we will certainly keep you posted, Dana, as it moves into the subsequent meetings.
Okay, so that's the process, which is important. The politics there, obviously, are critically important. And now let's talk about the people who are being held. Do we know anything about the condition of these hostages? All of them, but even specifically the women and children on that list of 50 who...
Where can I watch your true yourself? I mean, this is my true self.
Who are hopefully going to be released.
The answer is we simply don't. We know so little about the nearly 240 hostages held in Gaza, and that has been an incredible source of frustration. In fact, the little information we do know has only come out from the Israeli military when it says it has found the bodies of 2 Israeli hostages killed in Gaza and brought them out. There were several hostages released very early on, but that was weeks ago, if not more than a month ago. In terms of who is coming out, the 50 women and children, we know at this point almost nothing except that little bit. On the flip side of that, we also don't know anything about the 150 Palestinian women and children who are set to be released as part of this exchange. So in terms of the details of how this plays out, really the nitty-gritty of this, we are still waiting for that. And of course, the families of the hostages still waiting to find out if their loved ones are on that list.
Oren, thank you so much for that reporting. And this potential breakthrough in these hostage negotiations comes a day after the families of hostages met in Israel with the war cabinet there. Emotional calls to bring the hostages home. That's what happened in those meetings. Now, we heard similar emotion from one of the family members of a young girl that MJ was talking about, Abigail Adan. She's 3 years old. She's being held in Gaza. This is her great aunt speaking to CNN this morning.
These people have been in the dark for 45 days. Abigail is a beautiful child who wants to run around and play soccer with her older brother and sister. And she hasn't been able to run around in 45 days. I don't know where she is. We don't know. She should be home with her family and with her sister and brother. And she isn't right now. I'm not a politician. I'm not a diplomat. I will believe it when I see them walk out, to be driven out, and they are freed.
Our hearts are.
So, so there's that's the latest updates on the hostage negotiation process. Meanwhile, Ohad Tal from Religious Zionism has said, we are also considering resigning from the government and withdrawing from the coalition. And also, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich have said that they are going to vote against the initiative in the Knesset later today. Of course, ultimately, it doesn't matter that they vote in that direction. They can just like do it symbolically, knowing full well that the majority of the Israeli Knesset is going to vote in favor of facilitating this hostage negotiation, unless, oh my God, are you serious? There's a couple updates that I got to get into. Unless Benjamin Netanyahu fucks it up. Sorry. That's what I was going to say. And then you guys sent me an insane article from Emmanuel Fabian, who is like the embedded Times of Israel reporter on the ground in Gaza. Holy fuck. Several IDF deaths in Gaza were results of friendly fire. Bro, this is the most cop-coded military on the planet.